podcast.
Get started. It's good to see everybody here. A couple of quick things. We are recording this live and streaming it on YouTube. We're using this mic right here. We're not using a clip mic or a hand mic, which means that the quieter you guys are, the better that everyone on YouTube is going to be able to hear you. So I know I want to hang out with all you guys afterward, but between now and then, if you could be quiet, that'd be really great. Congratulations, everybody. This is super exciting. Picking finalists is really, really hard. It's really, really hard, especially because we gave you guys such a small amount of words, of characters to be able to describe your company. I know that the reviewing committee checked out your websites, looked through all the info that was online to see if you're an interesting company. That you made it this far is a huge compliment to you. You're, at this point, an elite crew. This is a very exciting competition. This is the third time we've done it. The hardest part is saying goodbye to people. So I just want to impress upon you now, I think you're all winners. I think you're all winners for getting this far. If you don't make it to the finale, you're still a winner. That does not mean that your startup is not worth your time and your efforts. Mostly it means it's either not the right timing or it's not the kind of company that people think they can make a venture return in. And that does not, by any stretch of the imagination, mean that it's not a valuable way to spend your time. So, I'm just going to really quickly introduce what we're going to be doing today, and then we'll get into it. Chris Calder, who's back there from Epic Ventures, one of our, what's the term I've been using? I don't know, one of the funding entities for this competition, them and Kickstart Seed Fund, is going to talk to us really briefly about what Epic looks for in a portfolio company, and consequently what they look for in a Start Madness winner. I think it's fair to say that what he says also goes for Kickstart Seed Fund. They co-invest often and very friendly, so please pay attention to what he's looking for. After that, is it Soman? I forgot to ask.
Either, but
Soman from 500 Startups is here to talk to you guys about how to pitch your startup. You have 4 minutes to pitch with your slide deck and 4 minutes for Q&A. That is not a lot of time. She's going to teach you about how to be really efficient with that time and convey everything that an investor needs to know about your company to make a decision. Okay. After that, Beth, where's Beth? Oh, over here from SmartMouth Communications. It's Beth Levine?
Right.
Okay. From SmartMouth Communications is going to teach you guys how to present in front of an audience. The finalists are going to be presenting in front of truly, I would say easily thousands of people. It's very intimidating if you've never done it before. Just walking out and introducing the companies, for me, is intimidating. So there's this whole thing that happens with the spotlight, and you can't see the audience, and you can hear your voice and the echo, and there's just this whole panoply of stuff that you've probably never faced before. The point of this is to help you learn how to put your best foot forward in that uncomfortable, awkward, stressful situation. Okay, and then afterward, we're hopefully going to have time to do some breakouts. So please stick around, and I'll be walking you through all that. Before we go, any questions? Nothing? Okay. You up? You ready? All right, let's give it up for Chris.
Thanks again for Steven, too, for putting us on. Do I need to stand within the light, or can I stand?
It's really wide. It's really wide.
Okay, I'm just here so I'll light the eyes. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Epic Ventures, and then I'll give you a couple of criteria we're looking for, and I think things we're going to focus on in the pitch competition. Epic's been around for about 20 years. We're one of the first venture firms in Utah. We were spun out of a Silicon Valley firm with the mission to bring venture capital to underserved markets like Utah. So we look very heavily at Utah, the surrounding mountain states, Colorado, Idaho, and then the Pacific Northwest and SoCal. And every once in a while we kind of get dragged into a deal in the Bay Area. But for the most part, we love Utah. We love Utah entrepreneurs. And every year, at least since I've been working with Epic for about 4 years now, we seem to do more and more investments in the state. So I think it's a testament to the quality of entrepreneurship and the quality of entrepreneurs like yourselves that are here. There are really three things that we're looking for in any investment we make, and three in particular that I think we're going to be focusing on in the pitch competition. They are quality of team, how compelling the product is, and the size of the market opportunity. And I'll talk just a little bit quickly about each of those three. On the team, generally we want to see relevant past experience. If you're going into a home services company, we want to see that you've done more than just shoveled your own walkway, but you've actually had experience in the industry. It's either past work experience, or you spent the last 6 months talking to every home services company you can, and you've learned everything you can about the industry. Somehow we want to know that you have a passion for the industry, and that your knowledge for the industry you're in goes beyond just a cursory high-level knowledge. We also want to see people that are aggressive, people that are have a winning mentality, that are fighters and that are tenacious. I think if we look across our whole portfolio and we look at all of the companies that have been really successful, the one common thread across all of them is tenacity of the founding team. Ability to work through problems, ability to fight through adversity. And frankly, if you have that quality and you don't make it to the end of the Start Madness competition, you'll do just fine regardless. The second thing we're looking for is a compelling product. And it's not necessarily saying that we want a product that is unique or innovative or would sell really well on Kickstarter, but we want a product that is compelling for your customer segment. And the way that we read this, the way that we see this trait in the product, is we look for your ability to acquire customers in a cost-effective manner, and your ability to monetize those customers at a ratio above your customer acquisition costs. For many of your companies, you'll be early on in the process of going to market. You may not have that kind of data, but to the extent that you can estimate that data, run some test campaigns online or use some keyword search estimates, that'll be really helpful for us looking inward on your company to intuit how compelling your product is. The third thing that we're looking for, and this is any venture fund, is the size of the market opportunity. You can read online all day about how the economics of venture funds work, but basically any investment we make has to have the potential for a 10x exit, otherwise our economics break down. Generally, if you do some math to kind of go from billion-dollar exit opportunity to revenue to exit multiples, generally we want to see $1 billion addressable market. We get a lot of companies that come talk to us and say they're in a $40 billion market. Your market is probably not 40, but none of our markets are probably $40 billion. So if you're on stage and you're talking about market size, make sure you drill down into your actual addressable, realistic market size. And if it's $500 million, that's okay. If it's $4 billion, that's okay. But try to be realistic and try to aim high and look for something meaningful size. I think those are the main points, and if you address each of those in your 4 minutes, you'll do just fine, both with us and with the audience. The only thing I would say to wrap up is best of luck. And echo Steven's points that if you guys don't make it to the finale, if you don't win Start Madness, send me an email afterwards and we'll talk, and maybe there's something to be done outside of that. So with that, very best of luck to all of you.
I want to make a couple really quick announcements. 2 people walked in a little bit late. Maybe I was just busy. Rachel and Kyle, can you guys all stand up? So on the 19th, if you need help, these and 2 people and me are the people you come grab, okay? If you're early and you're freaking out about something because you couldn't this or that, or whatever, these things happen, this is who you come talk to, okay? We'll be sitting in the room the entire day, probably even eat lunch there, so please come talk to us. Again, Rachel Hofstetter, Kyle Shanklin. So please be easy to work with. Because shit happens, this is a live thing, it's an event. If your clicker stops working, if your PowerPoint goes down, and this, that, or the other, just be really cool. I can't give you more time on stage, so just roll with it. And beforehand or afterward, come talk to one of the three of us. Now, fine. Ready?
Yeah. Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Sonnen from Five Startups. I'm based in our Mountain View office, which is our headquarters. How many of you guys know Five Startups? Okay, cool. We'll just take that. So we're a seed fund, local seed fund. We're the most active seed investor in the U.S. and globally, our Southeast Asia office is actually the most active seed investor. We're looking at about 400 companies going through our accelerator 4 different times throughout the year. So we work with companies mostly in the seed stage, but in pretty much all verticals. I work with companies on a variety of different things, but right now actually is the same time for our companies going through pitch prep. And that's for Demo Day, which is going to be in about a month. And so I'm going to talk to you guys about a 4-minute pitch, talk to you about what should be in your deck to make sure that people can actually digest all of the information you're giving them. The presentation, how you should structure that so people remember you, and a little bit about the Q&A afterwards. Anything that people are dying to know about, so I make sure I cover that? Okay, cool. I didn't bring a clicker, so I'm going to walk up and click through. Face will be really big on the live stream. Okay, so for the first rule, less is more. So you have 4 minutes. That's not a lot of time, but it's enough time for people to know whether or not they're interested in your business or not. And it's enough time for you to tell them the most important things. So this is more in respect to the deck and the deck creation. It is okay if your slide is just an image and you're talking over it. That, in fact, is a better deck to have. Because as an audience member, I'm not going to be distracted reading your slide. I'm going to be paying attention to the words coming out of your mouth, right? So be comfortable with having less on the slides. That doesn't mean you need to practice more, so you're not looking back at your slides hoping to get a hint for what the slide is about. But that, I think, is the first takeaway. And there are a couple of mistakes that people make when they're trying to go about this creation of the deck, and that's usually with starting from a different version. Yeah. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Usually what you want to have are 3 decks. They're fairly similar, but mostly differ with these 3 different categories. So your demo deck is going to be for a 4-minute pitch. Some slides might not have any text on it. This is going to be heavy on talking. You're going to be explaining a pitch. You might be telling a story. You might not be getting into the most interesting details that you want to talk to about, but it's really high level. Your email deck. A lot of times an investor wants to get a deck from you before you meet with them in person. This deck will have a lot more information, so it's going to be similar to your demo deck, but it'll have more context within each slide. So you might be writing out a sentence or 2 to explain that image, or to explain that number, or to explain the market. Then third, you want to have an in-person deck, pretty similar to the email deck, but maybe there's some sensitive information that you didn't want to include. If you're sending it to one investor, assume that that's going to get sent to a ton of other investors. It's very easy to forward that. So your in-person deck is going to be maybe having more details about your financials, more details about your competitor, maybe more details about your tech. So you can put that in person, you don't need to send that out. So these 3 are generally the different types of decks you want to have. The demo deck, you should definitely start from scratch, and that'll help you create the most concise version. Okay, don't make the slides first. This is sort of my point. I'm sure none of your slides look like this, but I've seen this a ton of times. Can't tell you the number of times startups feel this is important, and so is that. But we also need to include this little piece. No one's going to read this. You click right through it, and especially during the presentation. I mean, I don't think anyone's even reading through this right now, right? No. Yeah, and that's exactly my point. If you put up something like this, people are just going to go back to tweeting, go back to their email, right? Any break that they can get, they're going to take. And so you want to keep it as simple as possible. really black and white, and starting from scratch, I can't emphasize enough, is really important. Don't recycle an old deck because you use that for some other presentation or some other email that was tailored to impressing this one fact. And if you reuse that deck, you're by nature going to have a lot of extra information that you don't need. Great. So what are you talking about in your pitch? You're talking about numbers. Everyone's going to talk about numbers. You have to figure out what is your story. And this isn't an easy thing to do. I think this is the most difficult part about pitching. Because you have to figure out what's most interesting to your business that other people think are interesting. So what's your competitive advantage? That might be something that investors want to talk to you about. Are you guys working on something that's really unique and none of the other competitors out there are doing this? Do you have traction? A lot of people say, oh, well, we're really early. It doesn't matter. Every company has traction. And we'll talk a little bit later on what traction means. Do you have interesting tech in your business? So these are all different, storylines you can talk about. It might even be how you came up with the business. Maybe it's a really interesting story. It's usually not. But you might have, this really great day where this is what came to you. I quit my job. But a lot of people have that story. So test it out with groups of people that don't know your business as well, and figure out if they can, recite it back to you. If they can recite it back to you, they pay attention. And if they can't, they weren't paying attention. Cool. And so what you want to think about is, what does your audience want to hear? Do they want to hear about, the details of your business? Do they want to hear about the details of your marketing plan? Do they want to be, it's so cheesy, but do they want to be inspired by your story? Something that's going to be memorable. This is not to devalue numbers by any means. You definitely want to include that. But it's something that's going to make the audience remember your pitch. Okay. So from the pitches I've seen, I've worked with 10 batches of companies at 500. Each batch began ranging from about 30 to 35 companies, and now we're at 45 to 50 companies. They're usually picking one of 5 different plots for when they're pitching. These are usually what we'll see. So team story. Maybe you guys have an all-star team, and that's going to be your opening slide, and that's going to be what you really hone in on. And that's usually not the case, right? Maybe you have people that have worked at, a larger company, and you're building something that's competitive, and that's what you want to start with. Great. An example would be a company who was building airline software, and they had all been part of building software for large airlines that actually merged because of the software they wanted to acquire. That's what they started with. So that's the scenario in which team would be applicable. A customer story. What I mean by this, your solution, your product is so valuable that people, so this is the thing, right? You call your customer and say, would you be upset if I canceled my service, if I canceled my product today, tomorrow? And if they're upset, that might mean that you have a customer story to tell. Meet Joe. Joe is a so-and-so owner of blah, 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 and previously he was doing X, Y, and Z. After using our product or service, he's now been able to do this, this, and this. We've saved him X amount of money, he's increased sales by X%, and there's not just one of him, there's X many people in this big market, right? So that might be a customer story, where you're highlighting the difference you make for each of them, and then go into the market. Third, you might talk about the problem. So this is a huge problem, right? For Slack, everyone's complaining. For even people using WeChat, HipChat, all of this, email sucks. There's no better communication platform. So you can really talk about the problem you're solving, right? For a couple of the startups, they're talking about, I'm trying to think of an example, everyday problems that we have, right? For one of them, a company was doing on-demand coffee. They started with the problem. You're complaining that you wait 5 minutes for your Uber to get there, but you're willing to wait 15 minutes in line for coffee. This is the problem that everybody has, and that's how they went into it. So that might be something also to think about if that's the right fit for your company. Why you're building this business. This might be more of an emotional play on it. There might be a backstory here, why you started the company, what the problem is solving. Maybe you have like some type of like social good that you're also coupling the business model with, and that's really where this comes into play. And then market size. So if your company is operating in a space, any of the current buzzwords, you might want to start with that. Are you guys doing, machine learning, computer vision, AI, all of that stuff? Like, probably start with market because that's what people are going to perk up and listen to you for. So any questions about these different pods? Yeah,
Which one's the best?
I think it depends on your company.
Okay,
You
you see
can-
one win more than often than the others though?
The fun ones get more meetings, I think. Like the ones that are memorable. It's not even funny. I think it's the ones that tell you something where your emotions change significantly. So that might mean you laugh. That might mean you were like, oh, it's such a horrible problem. Oh, wow, I'm surprised I got saved so much money. Something where you can actually show the difference. Companies' pitches can go from being mediocre to excellent just by switching. So sometimes they try to tell a customer story, but it's just not that interesting. Then they go ahead and tell the market story, and it's, wow, I'm going to reinvest. So, yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is no one is as interested in you as you think that they are. So I know that you want to tell everyone in that audience, and tell every judge and every person on that panel every single detail, and everything about your team, and everything about your product, and what you have in the pipeline for the product, and the clients you've been talking to, and your market, and trends in the market, and how it's going to be growing for the next 20 years. There's way too much information, right? So you want to tell them as little as possible for them to be interested enough to talk to you again. 4 minutes is not going to convince them to invest in your company. 4 minutes is going to convince them that they want to maybe invest in your company. So the difference is really making sure you keep it interesting. Don't ask your co-founder if this is a good pitch. They'll probably lie to you and tell you it is. So find somebody who's your biggest critic. Find somebody who doesn't know your business well. Pitch it to them and pitch it out loud, right? Pitch it in a space. Don't just pitch it in a conference room or in your head. That's the worst. Be familiar with it. We can get into actual pitching now. Right. You picked a story. So I said company's pitch can go from mediocre to excellent just by changing around the plot. How do you know if it's a good story? So how does it help you? Is it adding value? Did you just tell me about how you decided to come up with this business and now you've wasted 30, 40 seconds of your pitch? What does it accomplish? Can you tell there was a big difference in the audience? And can someone pitch it back to you? I think that's really the main takeaway. Because that investor in the audience or that unique client or customer needs to remember your pitch in order to want to invest or want to work with you. So make sure it's concise enough, it's direct enough for them to remember, and then also, get the gist of it when it comes to somebody else about it. So many times in these demos, people are like, hey, which companies did you work? You can only name about a couple, right? Maybe a handful. So make sure your pitch is memorable. Okay. So, I want to get a little bit into what the deck should look like. And so, in terms of content. So this is generally the number of slides. This is in no particular order. So, from what I've seen, you want to talk about these things, and we can go into each one briefly. The way I like to think about it, think of them as Lego blocks, really. So, you have each of these slides, each slide is a Lego block. And you build them all, right? You have now 9 slides to work with. And maybe you start pitching it in the order of 1 to 9. And you can then just shuffle them, right? And maybe that makes a more interesting storyline for your company. So maybe you're going to start with, who are you? I might talk about, a one-liner about your company. Then you might jump to number 5. Talk about the market that you're in. Then, number 3. Talk about how much traction you have. The market's this big. Because it's this big and growing, we've been able to do X amount, or we've been able to tap into X number of users. Or in our pilot, we've done X, Y, and Z. Right? And you can go to 7 if necessary. A lot of times here's why we were able to do this well. Here's what our product looks like, and here's the flow, here's our added advantages, et cetera, et cetera. Go back to number 4, what problem, and this is not a problem for just one person, this is a problem for this many people. And you get the idea. You can jump around through any of these. But I think it's extremely helpful to create a slide for each of these points and then be able to shuffle them and play around with them. Questions?
Must be anything on business model there.
Yeah, so business model I think kind of is coupled into the product. Where's that? It's a solution product / for brand. A lot of the time for companies don't include one for business model. They might inject it into the who are you. A lot of them try and say, we're doing this for this by helping blah, 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 blah. Or a lot of them have a sentence, we make money by, which really calls out the business model in the pitch. If you want to spend time on it, depending on what your business is, you can just add a slide. But a lot of the time, it's kind of injected into the other pieces. Like again, you can inject it into who are you, into the product. If you're doing a customer example, you can talk about, that's literally explaining your business model. So yeah, it's very malleable. Just depends on what's most important. Is that a question?
Are 3 and 8 supposed to be the same?
Yes, that was my next point.
All right.
So if you are going in order, there is a particular order that Wave 500 like to use, and this is more of a play on keeping investors' attention up, and I'm going to get to that right afterwards. Yeah. Okay, so that is exactly what this slide is about. So what we call it is a traction sandwich. So your traction sandwich is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to start your pitch with traction in the beginning, and you're going to start your pitch with traction in the end. Silicon Valley, people are always complaining about founders being arrogant, obnoxious, in your face, blah, 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 right? But if you're talking about numbers and you're talking about facts and factual information about the growth of your business, that's not arrogant, right? And so what we like to do is figure out what is the traction that each company has. And so we'll start with that at the beginning of their pitch, if they have it, right? And then repeat that at the end. So for instance, it might be revenue, it might be users. You're going to talk about it. Maybe it's App Store. There's a company pitching. It's like, hi, my name is so and so. I'm founder of this company, and we're the number one we're the number one app in the App Store for pets, something like that. And that's immediately starting with it. They'll go through the details about their pitch, and then again repeat that same thing, probably 3/4 into the pitch. Make sense? So what you want to do is basically repeat that important information. At times, we also go as far as saying we're going to put it again on the very last slide, just so it is the last slide that people will see you on. So I'm pitching, I'm going to start with traction, I'm going to go through the deck, and have traction again after I talk about market and product and all these things. Then when I'm doing a closing with a call to action, I might still include traction on the slide. Yeah.
I just want to interject. It's a really great point because after your 4 minutes is up, we're not going to let you go back and forth inside of the slide deck. So once your 4 minutes is up, you want to end on the slide that's going to sit there during the next 4 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, and it's a good point also for pictures. People are probably taking pictures and you want your most impressive facts behind you to be spread on PR, social, like any press coverage. So yeah, that last slide feels a little schemish, but it's facts, right? You want to put down maybe number of customers, maybe it's impressive clients you're working with, number of cities you've accessed, revenue, downloads, things like that. And then for those companies who say, I don't have traction, I can't lead with that, what's your definition of traction? Because it's all of these things, right? It can be whatever is the most usually quickly growing part of your business, but also any of these can be highlighted. And it might not be things that you're tracking. It might not be metrics that you're focused on. You're tracking everything, I hope, but not the ones that you have like weekly updates for. For instance, maybe it's repeat purchases, right? How many times are people coming back to you? Maybe it's churn, right? Okay, these people have been using our software for X amount traction is for their company? I see no. Maybe, okay. What do you think traction would be? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, so in our case, which is an app, it would be downloads, but also for how much they use it. Downloads is huge, but if your total addressable market might be small, the numbers might not necessarily look good, but when people are actually using your product, they're staying on this page for how long that could take.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other thing. I think apps really are tracking downloads a lot of the time, and that's their one metric that's impressive. But how many of those people are active users? How many of those people have opened the app in the last month, in the last week, right? And if you have, it's usually that 1% of your user base that's using it all the time. That's what you want to hire. And a good investor knows that. So they're not going to ask you, how many downloads do you have? Great, because all of that might have been from one PR boost and bye-bye, right? So, okay. Yeah, this was mentioned earlier, but credibility starts at 100%. So please be accurate with the information that you're presenting. I mentioned market size before this. Be really, really diligent about knowing what terms you're using and knowing what they mean. Top line revenue is very different than net revenue. Your quarterly growth might look better than your monthly growth, but an investor that wants to invest is going to ask you for that information. Don't come off as shady. That's immediately going to be a tick against you, right? So if you have questions about that, ask. You have a ton of people and resources to tap into to know not to make these mistakes. So we can't stress it enough. Our companies do it. We try to catch it. There's always one or two companies that might slip up and use, recurring revenue instead of run rate. For SaaS, it's different. For e-commerce, it's different. It's not recurring if they came to your store once, right? So please be mindful of that. You also don't want to come off as not knowing what those terms mean, because that's also some signaling. Any questions? Cool. Yeah, this is just another piece. So this I wrote right off of Wikipedia, I think it was, maybe Ageless. And this further explains the point that was made earlier. Your market size is probably not what you think it is. There's a total addressable market, there's your serviceable market, and your target market, right? So depending on what product you're building right now might only address part of it. And it's okay to include both of them on a slide. To talk about, for instance, we talked about a company that was selling to puppy owners. Later on in their product line, they have a product for dog owners as well. So they had the market for puppy owners and they had the market for dog owners, both on the same slide. Just know the difference. Great. And so then this will dive a little bit into the Q&A. There should be no surprises in the Q&A. You know your business better than anybody else. What you need to do is be familiar and comfortable talking about the different pieces. Don't memorize answers. Don't get too caught up in the language and vocabulary that you're using with your teammates and your co-founders, because the nicknames and the words you use within your team don't translate accurately when you're talking to somebody outside of your business. So for instance, you might talk about a metric that you're tracking, and to me, that's not the same definition. So you want to make sure that you know exactly, how another person perceives your business, and not just what the internal company dialogue looks like. Any questions about this? About questions that will come up in the Q&A portion that you're a little apprehensive about? I honestly think if you prepare and you can think about these different pieces, that you'll have more than enough content to respond with. It's usually tell me more about the product, how are you going to scale? Be prepared to talk about that. If you have info on your unit economics and they're positive, emphasize that, because if you can just raise for marketing spend and pour marketing dollars into it, that's going to scale your business. Any elephants in the room? So if there's a huge competitor that every investor brings up, don't avoid it. Call it out right away. Because whatever you say before you call it out, they're just going to be thinking about that the whole time and not paying attention. Yeah, and how big is the market? They're going to want to know about that. And I think in the Q&A is where you can really add more information to that. Talk about trends, talk about behavior changes, talk about why the market is this large and it's growing and why that's going to be beneficial to your business in the next coming years, how your product is going to adapt to that, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the part where you can elaborate. Don't be type with words here. Okay, that's it for me. If you guys have questions, let me know. Anything on the deck content, anything on presentation in terms of how you should format the pitch, and obviously Q&A, those questions before this. Usually will cover pretty much all of the questions that will come up. Feel free to email me, whatever, if there's more information on 500, our fund, Twitter, and then, yeah, if you need more help, feel free to email me, or get connected directly. And, yeah, I'll take any.
What about including some portion of the product demo in your pitch?
Yeah, that's always really tricky. If you watch like Silicon Valley, right, there's always something going on. But I think it's risky only because you have 4 minutes. And what you do need to be prepared for is who's states video, screen's gonna go black, maybe video. For people presenting on stage in front of a large audience, and even a smaller audience, it's more frustrating. You might freeze, you lose a minute. So if it's necessary for the product, sure. But I would run through that 10 times more than any of your others.
I would just say it's going to be really hard to do a product demo. If you are trying to do a product demo that requires internet connection, like don't expect it to work. You're not going to be using a PowerPoint. I'll be sending an email. You're actually going to be sending me a PDF of your PowerPoint so that we have as few technical problems as possible. So I'm just saying, I will work with you, but it will be very, very hard. Please don't expect it to work or work well. So,
Yeah.
disclaimer.
Yeah. Downer.
Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. We tell all of our founders, I don't actually know what ratio their screen will be for the presentation, but that's always something that kind of looks a little janky, for lack of a better word, if the ratio isn't correct. Fonts, make sure you're embedding that in case you try to use a PDF on someone else's computer. Make sure all the formatting is correct. Any other questions about pitching, about the presentation deck? Yeah, so is the event going to be live streamed?
I hadn't thought about it. We'll see how this works out.
Okay. I think that's a longer conversation. I mean, if you were sitting at a demo day, and each company had 4 minutes to pitch, would you be paying attention to their financials? Don't you want them to just digest the most important takeaways and tell you that? I think that going into financials is maybe like a second or third meeting conversation. Yeah, I would.
Where do you find out more information about these investor terms that analysts run with?
Yeah, read a lot of TechCrunch. AngelList, so AngelList has a blog, a couple of the other good blogs are out there. Like they're usually talking about companies, but for terms, probably Mattermark. What is it again? Mattermark, MATTERMARK. CB Insights is really good as well. Just letter C, letter B Insights. AngelList, if you go actually to their FAQ or that part of the website, they have just a whole list of links that will explain to you different terms. But those 3 are the main ones. Yeah.
How much do investors want to see kind of the journey that you've gone through to some of the assumptions that you made that were wrong and how you pivoted? And is that important to show, do you think, or not as much in this kind of a...
I would say no. I think that that's the part that's interesting to you. That's the part that's interesting to the team and everyone else working with the team and mentors and peripheral resources. But to the investor, they just want to know what are you doing now. I don't care that you pivoted 5 times. What are you doing now? Obviously, in a second meeting and a third meeting, you might start to explain, well, we got to this point because actually we tested this and this and this, and it's only probably because you're pulling it in. But that's the stuff I wouldn't include. Just what are you doing now? And a really quick point, don't talk about what you're going to do in the future, because a very popular line is, well, that sounds awesome, talk to me when you're doing that, right? And you need the money now, so don't mention that. But anyway, I think I'm probably at time.
We can keep taking if you want.
Okay. Happy to take any more questions. Yeah, 1, 2. 1.
So it seemed like that was a lot of information to try to pack into 4 minutes. Do you have what segments you'd like to hear and what time slots you'd like to hear them in?
Sure. I think it sounds like a lot of information because there are 9 points. If you said 9 sentences, 18 sentences, 4 minutes is plenty of time. You don't need to explain each slide in detail. And that's why I say the slide should be really concise. But what's your company do?
It's a home server, so it's a personal cloud.
Okay?
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about it in terms of traction.
In terms of what?
Traction.
Traction, so we got $400,000 in the last 2 months of pre-sales.
Okay. How many customers?
2,000 customers.
Okay. Okay, so you could probably start with that. Do you guys have one-liners about your businesses? Just like that one-liner sentence that kind of fully encompasses what your business does? Yeah, you should all have them. And make sure that you tell that to somebody outside of your business. They know what it actually does. Not just like, oh, I need Uber for this or Airbnb for that. And it usually doesn't make sense to do that. You're pigeonholing yourself. There's probably a lot more to dive into, but I was trying to use it as an example. Probably start with your traction up front. Like, hi, we're this solution for this type of people, so demographic there. Talk about the traction. Your interest from the audience is going to be highest as soon as you get on stage and fall really fast. My first demo day at 500, I sat in the audience and didn't work with the companies just to watch how the investors watch the companies. And the amount of Twitter and email I saw on those laptops was unreal. And it was all after like the second slide. And this is something that we tell our companies, but put your Twitter or your email at the top portion of every single slide so that when they do become interested again in your pitch, maybe midway through, and they want to know what your company does, they can Google it quickly. But yeah, so just I guess in terms of format, talk about the traction really early. Get into probably your market, because market's really important regardless of what vertical you're in. Then you want to talk about product. A lot of the times companies pitch and at the end of it you have no idea what their product does, what their product looks like. Is it an app? Is it hardware? You have no idea. You want to get into team just so that you have some context, faces to names, and then repeat traction. You can do it in 5 slides. Usually it's like 9 or 10.
Follow-up question to that. There was a slide on plot. So it seems like we're trying to mix plot with these one-liners. So how do you do that in 4 minutes cohesively with, like, which parts would you tell a story about based on what you're saying?
So I think the plots are literally plots for these blocks. So you pick a plot, and then these will arrange accordingly. So say you're telling a customer story. You're probably going to talk about product. So you're probably going to talk about your solution first, right? Maybe it's a little bit about the problem. You're saying, there are X number of people with this problem, and like Joe Schmo is one of them. With our product, he's able to do blah, 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 right? So that's number 6. Probably number 4 to number 6. Then you can jump back into number 5. And it's not just him. We're working in a market that's X million, billion dollars, right? Then you can go back into the traction and elaborate more. Like I mentioned, we were able to do X amount in revenue from X number of customers in this much time. So it really just determines what the order is. I wouldn't worry so much about figuring this out before you pick what's interesting.
Sounds like a series of mic drops to me.
Yeah. But as long as you're factual with numbers, you're not airing it. Right? If you're saying my company's the best, we're gonna raise like a ton of money and we're gonna kill it, what did you say, right? That's what the arrogance is, that's what the arrogance is. When you say, hi, my name is so-and-so, our company is targeting this size of market, or you worked with this number of people, booked this much in revenue, and have 50 clients in pipeline, and we launched 2 months ago, fact. Sorry.
I had a timing question, but I think his question is
How important would you rate relating the problem to investors in the audience?
So there are different opinions on this. I think that you're not going to explain your company to all of the investors in the audience. For our demo today, we have up to 500 people. Maybe half of those, maybe 3/4 of them are writing checks actively. Maybe half of that remaining set of investors is interested in your type of a business. Maybe the remaining half of that is going to pay attention to your pitch. So you're really working with a portion of the audience. So don't make it relatable to everyone, because that's not possible, but just to who you're targeting, who those investors are that you want to work with. They should understand what you're saying. And if other people, maybe you're working on something with high tech, or maybe there's a Bitcoin company, right? If I don't invest in Bitcoin, I don't need to understand your pitch, because I'll never invest. So I think explain it and make it relatable as much as you need to, but don't overdo that. Okay, feel free to email me if you have any more questions. I'll be around all day today. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. Please be back here as Beth sets up. Feel free to wander around Church and State. As you guys know, the winner of the Audience Choice Award gets 6 months free dedicated desks upstairs. That's up above the conference rooms in the main hall. So wander around. Restrooms are down here, 2nd floor and 3rd floor. So thanks. Yeah. Okay, fine. Okay. Do you want to go see it, please?
Yeah.
So showed up pretty well.
Apparently the audio is good.
Where is it filming from?
It's filming right here.
Oh.
It's pretty rickety.
I mean, it looks like a webcam.
It's a nice webcam, but it's still a webcam.
Well, it looks good here.
Yeah, but it's spinning. It's yellow.
True.
I've been noticing it'll click back and forth.
Is it because it's not on? I guess it's on members.
They said that's the fastest one. I think it's actually my machine. It's if you open up that, it's running that software, which connects to YouTube, and it's recording the whole thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think it's mostly just I should have brought a nicer laptop.
You could always hold up your phone.
Well, I was thinking about
Record
just
it.
periscoping it or whatever.
Yeah.
But no. Okay. I'm gonna run the rest.
Cool.
This microphone's the same one I will be bringing, so it's a good idea we have to say
Right now it's on. Oh, that was a video, so I guess it's recording. So this isn't updating as fast, and we think it's the actual computer, it's not Wi-Fi, but it's just recording that, and it's sending it to YouTube, and it's going to YouTube just fine. It's just not showing up on here that well.
Okay.
But it's just through YouTube.
Okay, so the microphone here, so yeah, we'll have the same thing, the computer setting, the computer recording, and we won't be using YouTube. So yeah, in fact, that's the exact same camera we used to actually. Yeah, there was a good stuff.
That'd be great. Let's get started.
Anyway, okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, one question.
So I love you guys are talking. Entrepreneurship is a really lonely thing, so it's good that when you guys have an excuse to get together and talk. Please keep these conversations going afterward and after the whole Start Madness. But I want to introduce Beth. Beth, I'm yours.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. So Tanya gave you kind of the meat and potatoes of what your presentation content should be like. But I'm going to talk to you about your delivery, your actual physical delivery. So where she gave you a ton of stuff for your head, all of your heads, and you're going to be processing that and fine-tuning your presentations over the next week, I'm adding a layer on top where you're going to need to multitask once you start the presentation. So hopefully I'll give you some helpful tips. This is a super brief presentation, and then you can ask me any questions you want to ask me. And use me kind of as, if you want, as a laboratory. Like ask me, why am I doing that? Did I do it on purpose? Is it intentional? What does it do for the audience? Okay? So, this quote kind of says it all. What you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say. So here's the reality of human attention and retention. First of all, your audience will pay attention pretty well in the beginning. Even in 4 minutes, their attention will dip, and then they'll come back. The attention will come back when they hear you wrapping up. So that's a big challenge. So Tanya gave you several options for how you might open, what your start might be. But ultimately, and this is a pretty generous statistic, the retention and the ability to connect will come 20% from what you say and 80% from the feeling that you give people. So don't hold back on excitement, on passion, on genuine curiosity, concern. Regular human emotions are what draw other people in. So the point of all of that, and I've given it to you briefly, is that your delivery matters. How you put on the show actually matters. How many of you are worried that you're going to be a little nervous? Especially if you make it to the final round. Okay, there are a lot of people who aren't nervous. Raise your hand if you're not nervous. Wow, come see me afterward. I want to do like a scientific experiment. That's amazing. I almost never hear that. So for those of you who are nervous, there are a couple of things you need to know. First of all, your audience is sort of excited and eagerly anticipating what you're going to bring them. They're focused on that. They're not 100% focused on whether you're nervous or not. And a lot of people don't notice. So I've worked with groups where they've gotten up in front of each other and done mock presentations. They sit back down and someone will say, I couldn't even breathe. Did you guys all notice that? And nobody notices. So they're unlikely to notice. Second thing is that within the first 2 minutes, your nerves are likely to fade. Now, that's a lot better news for a group that would give a 20-minute presentation than it is for a group giving a 4-minute presentation. But the thing you need to know, and some of you may know this from experience already, is that it fades. It's at its worst, it's adrenaline, and it's at its worst when you start. So just be aware of that.
Take a few steps to the left so you're in the camera.
Okay, actually that's a really good, there's a camera.
Yeah. A few more steps. It should be good, yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'm violating one of my rules though. So do you know why I'm standing here on this side? Well, I want to say hi to the camera, but I don't want to block the screen necessarily. But the where you want to put yourself, and Nelson, go to the next slide and see what we have. Okay, we're going to get back to that. This side with the screen to your left is easier on your audience's eyes. So to the extent that you're going to follow Tanya's rules and keep it simple, keep it clean, keep the visuals clean, all of that is so that you limit the amount of work you make your audience members do. And so one of the rules of thumb or best practice is to have the screen to your left Because if you're sitting across from me, your eyes naturally, because we read from right to left, your eyes go from right to left. And it's easier to pay attention to the speaker and then get a gander at the slide if you, as the speaker presenter, keep the screen to your left. Okay. That was a little diversion. I have to get back to the camera's view. Sorry, Stephen. So, just about your personal energy, it's all good. If you're nervous, just treat it like a friend that's going to come with you to the front of the room. You know it's going to be with you. Just be okay with it. It's your body's adrenaline saying, this is important, this matters to me, I want to kill it, here we go. So don't worry about it, don't wish it away, don't try and push it away, it's just a fact of life. And the last point, flip the switch, turn it on. You guys have to put on a show. If you're one of the finalists and there are anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 people in the audience, you're putting on a show. Because like Stephen said earlier, you're not going to be able to see very many people in the audience. It's going to be like blinding and surreal because you're in front of a really large audience. So just in your head, know that even for the preliminary round, and if you're lucky enough to make it to the final round, you're actually putting on a show. You're not just sharing your story and your idea and your company. You've actually got to put on a show. Tanya covered PowerPoint pretty well, but I always like to tell groups that Microsoft called it PowerPoint, not every point. And Tanya already went over this, and you only have 4 minutes. But it's not your script, it's a visual aid for the audience. It's reinforcement. So I'm in 100% agreement with Tanya that if you can use images and talk about those images, that's the best possible thing for your audience and their ability to retain and get a sense of your story. Second point is provide guidance. And what I mean by that is if to the extent that you guys have time to rehearse, and I'm going to encourage you to rehearse, to the extent that you can do that, I want you to know what is it that you want your audience to know about every slide. Guide them. Tell them what they're looking at. You can't expect people to track and follow and know just because it means something to you, it may not mean anything to them. You want to give them that guidance. Okay, I'm transitioning now to our anticipated customer base. And what's important about this is, so in other words, you're constantly feeding them their takeaways. And finally, choreograph yourself. So I just talked about that being where you have the screen to your left is important. And you're also going to want to think about choreographing yourself, which we'll talk about more in a second. Okay, finally you. I'm going off camera for 1 second to get a prop. So you guys are the show, right? What if I had worn this jacket instead of the black jacket I'm wearing? How long do you think you could look at me for?
Hours.
Give me your number. So the jacket is actually blinding, okay? And a lot of patterns and accessories and things like that can be very blinding, distracting. You want to think of yourself as a little bit of a blank slate. You want their attention on your face, your energy, your voice. You want them to be paying attention also to your graphics or images behind you and to the left. So you want to think about that also. You do want to think about what you wear. White is difficult in a large room. It can kind of pale you out. Plaids start to get into what my jacket does. So just be aware of, think through what you're wearing, and I would probably suggest solids for everyone. Voice. They'll be mic'd, or there'll be mics coming down from the stands?
I believe in the preliminary round, we're not doing any microphones at all.
Okay.
In the finale, in the past, they've had the option to do the around the ears next to the mouth,
Okay.
or hold a microphone.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest to you that you opt for one of the hands-free options, unless you're super nervous and you think you're going to want to grip something. Then you can hold a microphone. But know that most handheld microphones, you have to get it close enough to where you can hear the amplification in the room, and then you know you have it close enough. If you hold it out here, which is a more comfortable, non-close talker kind of a distance, then you're unlikely to be amplifying throughout the room. So if you do opt for the handheld, hold it pretty close, you should be able to hear the amplification yourself, and that's how you'll know that it's working. So voice. The other thing about your voice is you can modulate it. You can slow down, you can speed up, you can emphasize something by being louder, or you can be a little bit softer, as long as you're amplifying, but your voice is a tool. Body language. What if I had stood here and talked to you like this? I think you would have thought, she doesn't want to be here. She doesn't want to be with us, she's closed, I can't really talk to her, she's not accessible. So body language is more forward toward your audience, kind of up and open. Just want to think about wanting to embrace your audience and be with them. I get asked a lot if it's okay to use hands. People say, oh, I talk with my hands, I know it's a terrible habit. And I say, actually, it's, unless you're, your hands are flying across your face, it's not bad. It's actually okay. You're flipping the switch, you're on, you're putting on a show, you're drawing these people into your story, into the opportunity that you're offering. Body movement. So you wouldn't want me walking across the projection light and being that distracting, and you wouldn't want me pacing or walking in crazy circles, but a little bit of movement, standing still and stiff is less of a show, but if you're moving and you're kind of fluid with your presentation, it's not only okay, but it's a good thing to keep the audience with you. And also to express passion or excitement. Moving around might help you do that. Eye contact. Eye contact will be absolutely impossible in the larger audience if you're one of the finalists. In that large audience, it's going to be hard. So the rule of thumb for eye contact in a really big room is to start with your eyes toward the back, at least directionally. You might not be looking at a face. Start toward the back and in a Z formation kind of come forward. Again, this is a ton of multitasking, but it's a best practice and I want to give it to you. It's hard. So you'll be with your content, with your slides, in this intimidating room, and you may not remember the eye contact thing, but try and do your best. In the smaller room that all of you will be in, you're definitely going to want to try and make eye contact with the panel, even if they're not looking back at you. Okay? And finally, I just want to talk to you about your mindset around your energy. So I can imagine that there may be some people in this room who are very excited for this opportunity, but they're absolutely dreading the presenting part, or it feels like, I just got to survive that. I want you to take that mindset, toss it out the window, replace it with the ambition that you have and the opportunity that you know you have that's amazing. So don't dread it. Don't look at it as, if I leave the room and I still have a pulse, I survived it, it's all good. Go in there, grab the opportunity, Bring all of your ambition, all of your creativity, and all of your great ideas into the room with you. This is an opportunity. It may create nerves, it may be unnerving, but just go for it. And embrace it like that. Don't embrace it as something that, okay, if I'm breathing by 2 o'clock, I'll be fine. Okay? So, questions. Ask me anything. Yes?
If there are two people presenting, the person not talking, what should they be doing, not doing, breathing?
Okay, that's a great question. So, co-presenting. How many of you will have a co-presenter? Okay, a significant number of you, or some of you, I don't know. Of those with a co-presenter, how many will have a talking co-presenter? Very few, okay. The talking co-presenters must coordinate ahead of time, and you have to have certain agreements between you. Those agreements are, how do we open and close? Who's going to do what? How are we going to pass the baton? It's like a relay. How are we going to do that? And I want you to physically, I'm calling you out, practice doing it. Another really significant agreement that you have to make with a co-presenter is how do you want your co-presenter to remind you that you forgot a significant chunk of what you were supposed to say? Do you not mind them saying, oh, and Beth, don't forget the part about blah, blah, blah? Or do you find that really undermining? You have to talk those things through. If you want your co-presenter to jump in and save you, if you're starting to flail or if you forgot something, you can make that agreement. Or if that would just completely throw you off, then you talk that through and make sure you have that agreement. When if your co-presenter is up there with you and they are not talking, they need to watch you and behave as if they're part of the audience. So even though they're standing with you, they give you their attention. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Great.
A quick thought. If there's maybe a more technical co-founder that isn't going to be doing the first 4 minutes, but wants to participate in the second
Q&A.
4 minutes, the Q&A, what we've seen in the past and what's worked well is as the presentation 4 minutes ends, you say, now we're moving into the Q&A, I want to introduce my co-founder. A lot of times it's pretty easy because often the last or second to last slide introduces that co-founder in the
Because the
credentials
team
anyway.
is on there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, great.
So, and then if you're just, don't both try to answer the question. So if one of the investors asks a question, one of you take it or the other one, but don't try and do both. Because you can plan your 4 minutes to go back and forth, but you can't plan how to do the.
Right. How many of you will have more than 2 co-presenters? Like, nobody's bringing the team up, right? Okay, all right. Yes?
Is a presenting duo better than a single person, or what do you?
Actually, I think it introduces more risk. I do. I think that, because unless the co-presenter who's going to stand there and maybe pitch in once or twice is really good at standing and, and doing that appropriately, watching you as the speaker when you're speaking, then it introduces a distraction, potential risk. They might space out and forget that that was their cue to jump in. I just, you've got 4 minutes. On the one hand, 4 minutes can be, it's a nice chunk of time. You can tell your story in 4 minutes. On the other hand, there's no room for fluff, and it's not a lot of pushing. Yes?
Question about your presentation. Black and white text.
Right.
Can you go into that a little bit?
So, way back when, it used to be, I don't know, if none of you, I don't think, are old enough to remember this, it used to be like blue background, yellow font. And it's morphed over time. And so I have moved, and this is sort of a Guy Kawasaki thing, I stole it. He uses a black background with white font. And so and sans serif, in other words, there's no curlicues or anything on the font. So I've started to really, I tried it earlier this year, Nelson, we tried it out, and I really, really like it. And also, the other benefit is you don't have to shut off the lights to be able to see the slides. I hate a dark room PowerPoint. It's the international signal for get your thumb in blankie, it's nap time. So, yeah. Other questions? Nope. Okay. You guys, good luck. I'm going to be out of town next week, and I'm going to miss the show, and I'm sorry about that. I already heard one great idea, so good luck to all of you. I'm around for a little bit if you want to ask questions.
All right, that was so amazing. Hey, I'm Rachel. We just learned so much from Beth, so much from Tanya. I'm sure you are itching to go put all of those things into action, and guess what? We're going to let you. So if you are here live right now, we're going to break into 5 small groups. And we're going to put Tanya's slide back on the projector. That one that said, break it down. That said, who you are, what your traction is, what you're going to do. And we are going to get in groups. Steven's going to lead one, Tanya, Beth, Kyle, and I are each going to be in one. And we're just going to go through those together. Because sometimes the hardest part is just saying it out loud for the very first time. And we'll have feedback for you, but also everybody in this room is super, super smart. And I know you're, in theory, competing against each other, but we're also all part of this Utah ecosystem here, Mountain West ecosystem, if there's anybody here from not in Utah. So we can give feedback to each other too, right? Because we all get better when we get better together. So I'm just going to make up really broad groups here. Front of the room, back of the room, front, back, and then everybody who's kind of on the couches can be the 5th group. Any questions? We'll do this for like 30, 40 minutes, give everybody a chance to say it out loud, and start doing what you're probably going to do for the next week. Non-stop.
Let's say goodbye to the live stream.